Are you sick? No, I just can't be seen right now.
At all?
We talked about it. It was basically he did not want his mother to be, although she might have known, but he wasn't going to come out and say this to the world. And he had a lot of lady fans, and he told me that he just didn't want to upset the world.
For years, fans were obsessed with Luther's love life, convinced he was secretly entangled with everyone, from Teddy Pendergrass, who he publicly adored,
Love is somebody, and somebody loves you back,
to Michael Jackson, whose quiet friendship fueled endless whispers, and even Whitney Houston, after their stunning duet sparked fresh headlines.
So I'm saving all my love for you.
But behind all the rumors was a man battling loneliness, a stroke that stole his health, and the constant fear that coming out could destroy everything he'd built. Even Patti LaBelle's confession about his sexuality stirred more debate than compassion, proving just how relentless the spotlight could be.
how I'd love to dance with my...
Luther Vandross was that singer everyone knew could make a love song feel like it was meant just for them. He sold millions of records, grabbed a bunch of Grammys, and had a voice that glided between soft and soul-crushing in a single note. Even though Luther's music was basically the soundtrack for romance, he always stayed low-key about who he was dating. Folks were forever curious about who he loved, and gossip columns never stopped guessing. People close to him shared later on that Luther did have real relationships, but he worked hard to keep them under wraps. Bruce Valanche, one of his longtime friends, talked about how Luther fell for a guy he met in Los Angeles. They were said to be really close, but Luther worried that being open about it could mess with his career and maybe turn fans away. Everyone around him respected how much he wanted to keep that part of his life to himself. When reporters tried to get personal, he'd just brush it off with playful comments and keep it moving. In the middle of all that, Luther had a stroke that changed everything. He couldn't perform anymore and slowly pulled back from the spotlight, spending most days at home in New York.
I wish I could be with you there tonight. I want to thank everyone and for your love and support. And remember, when I say goodbye, it's never for long.
Even when he disappeared from public view, people never stopped wondering about the side of Luther they never got to see. Years after Luther passed, Patti LaBelle went on TV with Andy Cohen and finally spoke up about what so many people had guessed for ages. She said Luther was gay and just too scared of losing fans to ever share it himself. The second she put it out there, everybody had an opinion. Some thought it was brave and necessary, while others felt it crossed a line since Luther had worked so hard to keep that private. It was one of those things that didn't have a simple answer. A lot of folks in the LGBTQ+ community, especially Black queer men, always felt a connection to Luther's story because they knew what it was like to love someone without being able to say it out loud. But there were also people who believed his choice to stay quiet should have stayed respected, no matter what.
Well, Andy can ask, but she should have said no comment.
That mix of admiration and controversy ended up shaping the new documentary, Luther, Never Too Much. The film promised to show all sides of him, the artist everyone adored, and the man who spent years keeping a big part of his life hidden. Even with all the Grammys and hit songs, the fact that Luther kept so much to himself just made people more curious. Fans and gossip writers loved wondering who he was singing about when he poured his whole heart into a ballad. For the longest time, stories about secret boyfriends and hidden relationships kept floating around. Whether true or not, those whispers turned into this whole legend about the parts of Luther's life he never let anyone fully see.
Love is somebody, and somebody loves you back.
Teddy Pendergrass had already turned himself into this unstoppable superstar way before anyone tried to link him with Luther Vandross. As the main attraction for Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Teddy made songs like If You Don't Know Me By Now feel like an anthem for anybody with a heartbeat. When he went solo, he didn't just perform, he owned every stage, and the hype got so intense that promoters even threw concerts just for women to keep the chaos under control. While Teddy was out there setting venues on fire, Luther was quietly stacking his own wins behind the scenes. He started out recording background parts and arranging tracks for other people, then slid into the spotlight with that smooth voice everybody fell for. Before long, Luther was the guy you called when you needed a ballad that could melt someone on the spot. Their paths crossed all over the place. They worked with the same producers, put out records under the same labels, and both stayed super private about who they dated. That combo, and the fact that Luther never hid how much he respected Teddy, sparked rumors they were more than just colleagues. But nobody ever pulled out any receipts. Like most music industry gossip, it was mostly people making up stories because they couldn't believe two famous black men could just be fans of each other without something extra going on. Next, Stephanie Mills. Stephanie Mills came through with those huge vocals and a stage presence that had everybody hooked. She first wowed crowds playing Dorothy and the Wiz, and then kept the hits rolling with songs like Never Knew Love, Like This Before, and I Feel Good All Over. She built a name as one of soul's most recognizable voices. Their careers seemed to run side by side. Same big labels, same love for slow jams, same packed-out shows with fans hanging on every note. They didn't just cross paths at award shows. Luther jumped in on Stephanie's albums with his smooth background vocals, and the two were always showing up together at concerts and music events. Because they teamed up so often, and because Stephanie was one of the few women Luther hung out with in public, people started guessing they were secretly together. Their habit of keeping their private lives locked down only made the stories grow. But underneath all that gossip, it was just two artists who really respected each other and loved making music. Like most rumors about Luther, it was more about folks trying to write their own fantasy than anything real. Next, Patti LaBelle.
Such a joy to feel your love. Never send me.
Patti LaBelle had already stamped her name in music history. First, she led LaBelle and dropped Lady Marmalade. Then she took over as a solo star with those huge vocals and a style that turned heads. Fans loved her for the way she lit up a stage, and for how funny and down-to-earth she stayed when the spotlight faded. Her connection with Luther Vandross ran deep. They clicked in a way that only two artists who truly got each other could. They sang together all the time, hyped each other up in interviews, and kept a friendship that felt almost like family. Luther trusted Patti with the parts of himself he rarely shared, the stuff he kept tucked away from everybody else. Because they were so close and so vocal about how much they cared, people couldn't help spinning stories that it was more than friendship. Every time Patti talked about how private Luther was with his feelings, the rumor mill went into overdrive. Gossip columns loved acting like she was dropping secret hints about some hidden romance. But really, it was never that complicated. It was just two legends who found something solid in each other. A friendship strong enough to outlast the fame, the noise, and every headline that tried to turn it into something it wasn't. Next, Al B. Sure. Al B. Sure popped up in R&B with that smooth falsetto and a fresh style that mixed hip-hop with slick melodies. His first album blew up, mostly because Night and Day was everywhere, and pretty soon, he was the guy everyone wanted to work with if they needed that cool, modern sound. Even though Al and Luther didn't exactly make the same kind of music, Luther leaned into classic arrangements, while Al was all about that new jack swing. they kept ending up in the same rooms. They were signed to the same label for a bit, worked with some of the same producers, and circled the same music scenes. Since neither of them ever talked much about who they dated, it didn't take long for gossip to fill in the blanks. Al never hid how much he respected Luther's voice, and Luther always gave Al props for shaking up R&B. That little bit of public admiration was all it took for people to start whispering they were secretly together. In the end, it was just two artists who liked what the other was doing and happened to be part of the same circles. Nothing more than respect and a few shared studios. Next, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's career was on a whole different planet. Once Thriller hit, he basically became the blueprint for how huge an artist could get. His mix of pop hooks, soulful moments, and flashy stage moves turned him into the biggest star alive. Luther was the guy everyone called to lay down flawless background parts, and he teamed up with a lot of the same producers Michael relied on for those massive records. They both spent time signed to Epic Records, so they'd cross paths at label meetings, fancy award shows, and music industry parties. Since neither of them liked sharing personal stuff, it wasn't shocking that tabloids tried to stir up stories about them. Every now and then, gossip blogs would claim they were secretly tight or even dating. Those rumors never really blew up into major headlines, but anytime someone felt like dragging up Michael's private life, or Luther's, they'd pop back up. Nothing about it ever checked out. It was just two legends who knew each other's work and kept it professional. The rest was all made-up drama people loved to pass around. Next, Freddie Jackson. Freddie Jackson showed up in R&B with those smooth, slow jams that everybody loved to play late at night. Songs like Rock Me Tonight and You Are My Lady turned him into the go-to guy for romantic ballads that felt a little more grown than the usual radio hits. Freddie and Luther pretty much ruled the same lane, grown folks music that had way more depth than whatever pop was doing. They ended up sharing festival stages, music award nights, and plenty of tribute shows. In the studio, they were both known for being super picky about getting every detail perfect, and they worked with a lot of the same songwriters and producers. Because their careers lined up so neatly, and because neither of them ever talked much about their love lives, it didn't take long for gossip to start swirling. The rumor mill decided all that mutual respect and the occasional collab had to mean something romantic was happening behind closed doors. But none of it was real. Just like so many stories people told about Luther, it was all guesswork. The truth was simple. Two talented artists who cared about making timeless R&B and happened to cross paths a lot. That was it. Next, Darnell Williams.
I should have told you this a long time ago, but I couldn't because I didn't want to hurt you.
Darnell Williams carved out his own spotlight on daytime TV, turning into a soap superstar with his role as Jesse Hubbard on All My Children. He scooped up a couple of big awards and had fans treating him like a rock star back when soap actors were the biggest deal. He wasn't exactly living in the music scene like Luther, but their circles still bumped into each other. They showed up at the same black entertainment galas, charity events, and those flashy TV specials that celebrated black talent. Both of them knew what it felt like to be super famous while keeping personal stuff locked down tight. Since Darnell was known for staying quiet about who he dated, and Luther had that same habit, it was only a matter of time before gossip blogs started making up their own stories. Anytime someone spotted them at the same event, rumors popped up that they were secretly together. But none of it ever added up to anything real. Just more of that predictable chatter. See two successful black men who keep their business private, then decide they must be more than friends. The talk said way more about people's obsession with guessing who was dating who, and the judgment around same-sex relationships, than it did about Darnell or Luther. Next, Billy Porter.
See, I know times are hard. I mean it from.
Billy Porter came up in the 90s, already serving big talent on Broadway, making waves in kinky boots, and later becoming a fashion legend and a face of LGBTQ+ pride. Way before he was collecting trophies and shutting down red carpets, Billy was deep in New York's theater and nightlife scene. The same places music stars loved to hang out when they needed a break from the spotlight. Luther spent a lot of time in New York too. When he wasn't recording or touring, he'd show up to cabaret shows and Broadway nights, just soaking in the performances. Even though Luther and Billy worked in different corners, Billy doing theater, Luther ruling soul. They had plenty of mutual friends and would end up at the same galas, charity events, and clubs that mixed music, stage, and activism all in one. Since Billy was always upfront about who he was, and Luther kept his personal life locked down, it didn't take much for the rumor mill to start spinning. Nightlife blogs and gossip columns were quick to claim there had to be more going on anytime they crossed paths. Next, Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was already running pop and R&B by the time most people first heard her. Her voice could flip from huge stadium anthems to songs that felt like she was singing right to you. Hits like How Will I Know and Greatest Love of All turned her into an icon practically overnight. It made sense that she and Luther kept ending up in the same spaces. They shared labels, trusted a lot of the same managers and producers, and had nothing but respect for each other's talent. When they finally teamed up to sing I, Who Have Nothing, for Luther's project, it was the kind of duet that left everyone stunned. Their voices fit together so perfectly that people couldn't help running to gossip columns with stories. From then on, every time they hugged at an awards show or traded compliments on camera, the rumors kept picking up steam. Blogs were sure there had to be something romantic happening behind the scenes, but none of it ever turned out to be true. Their connection was all about shared respect and knowing exactly what it felt like to carry the weight of huge expectations. It was just two legends who understood each other's world. Next, Lenny Kravitz. Lenny Kravitz showed up in the early 90s with that cool mix of rock, funk, and soul that felt fresh but still paid homage to the old-school legends. His first album, Let Love Rule, proved he wasn't just about the look. He was serious about the music and could jump between styles without breaking a sweat. They both had deals with big labels, worked with all the top producers, and turned up at the same award shows, fundraisers, and flashy parties in New York and LA. Lenny had a reputation for hanging with all kinds of creative people, and Luther was known for keeping his private life locked down. So it didn't take much for gossip blogs to latch on to any moment they were spotted together. A quick chat at a gala or a compliment in an interview was suddenly proof they were secretly dating. It was the usual pattern. Fans and tabloids taking two famous names and turning normal professional respect into some big secret romance. In reality, they were just artists who liked each other's work and happened to move in the same circles. Next, Teddy Riley.
East side to the west side, pushing fat rides, it's no surprise.
Teddy Riley totally flipped R&B on its head when he came up with New Jack Swing. That blend of hip-hop drums and smooth hooks turned groups like Guy and Blackstreet into major names, and pretty soon, Teddy was producing for everybody from Michael Jackson to Bobby Brown. Luther always had an ear for people who were changing the game, and Teddy's clean, fresh sound definitely grabbed his attention. They shared label connections, had the same music execs in their corners, and ended up in the same studios and award shows, especially when Luther started mixing newer styles into his own tracks. Since Teddy was seen as this young genius, and Luther was known for looking out for rising talent, the gossip machine didn't waste time stirring things up. Blogs started hinting that their work relationship was somehow extra personal, all because neither of them liked sharing much about who they were dating. There was never anything behind the stories except two artists who respected what the other brought to the table. The rest was just gossip folks cooked up to make everything look more dramatic than it really was. and lastly Ron Isley.
You know I got it. Hey.
Ron Isley spent years being the smooth voice behind the Isley Brothers, dropping classics like This Old Heart of Mine and Between the Sheets that basically set the tone for every slow jam playlist ever. His style shaped R&B in a way that left a mark on a whole generation of artists, Luther Vandross included. Luther always gave Ron and the Isleys credit for inspiring him. He grew up playing their records non-stop and even put out his own version of For the Love of You as a shout-out to Ron's legendary sound. When Luther's fame took off, all that admiration turned into a real friendship. They performed together at tribute shows, hung out at industry parties, and never held back when it came to hyping each other up. Because they were so close, gossip blogs couldn't resist spinning their friendship into something else. Whispers about some secret romance started bouncing around backstage and in the tabloids, mostly because people thought their connection seemed too genuine to just be about music. But none of those stories ever added up to anything solid. The rumors said a lot more about everybody's obsession with hidden drama than it ever did about Ron or Luther.